Kentucky played two quarterbacks last week. Will Kentucky play two quarterbacks this week? We're going to dive inside the numbers, how bad that position's been for the Wildcats in 2024. All that and more. It's your Wednesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Eric Kane. Can't thank you enough for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. You guys know it. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at Game Time, where you can download that Game Time app, create an account, put in the promo code Locked On College, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, our friends over at Game Time. Okay, so we got a lot to get into here today. I'm going to kind of dive into the numbers for Kentucky's quarterback situation. Obviously, last week it was Brock Vandagriff that got benched at halftime, and Kentucky went with the former Rutgers transfer and Gavin Wimsatt, and he came on to finish that game. Who's going to start? We're going to learn a little bit about these quarterbacks here in segment number one, and a little bit about a former Tennessee player that is currently playing in Kentucky right now and kind of adding to this rivalry just a little bit. In segment number two, disappointing 5 stars. Interesting article when I was perusing over at CBS Sports earlier on a Wednesday or Tuesday. I saw this article about disappointing 5 stars, so naturally I clicked on it and I read the article. So they did their job. I was intrigued by it, and I wanted to share a little bit about that article here on Locked On Vols. So that's coming up. A couple of Tennessee ties, and we'll discuss that in segment 2. And then Josh Ward, everything we need to know about Tennessee and Kentucky, and of course what's going on with Tennessee football right now with Josh Ward. Ward Wednesday coming up in segment number 3. All right, so Kentucky's quarterbacks. Potentially Tennessee could see 2 quarterbacks, and Tennessee's seen 2 quarterbacks already this year at Oklahoma. Tennessee saw 2 quarterbacks against Florida. Tennessee's been dealing with some mobile quarterbacks against Oklahoma, against Arkansas, against Florida, against Alabama. I mean, by this point in the season, you've seen a lot, and you've been getting reps against a lot. Now, with all due respect, to this point, and I'm never one to try to kick somebody when they're down, but to this point, of course, the Kentucky offense has just not been great. I mean, in fact, it's been far from great. In fact, it's been the complete opposite of great. It's been atrocious, especially in Southeastern Conference play. 7 conference games. 6 conference games, 8 touchdowns. It's not good. And the quarterback position by a former 5-star himself, now not in the list I'm going to be talking about right now, but he could certainly be kind of categorized in this situation we're going to be talking about in segment number 2. Brock Vandagriff, former 5-star, disappointing. Very disappointing. Of course, he was a part of the class of 2021, I want to say. He spent a couple years at Georgia. Kentucky came over, got their quarterback, and he's been really bad. And I don't think it's been just one issue. I don't think it's been just the quarterback. I don't think it's been just the lack of playmakers at wide receiver, because they've got a couple playmakers. I think running back wise, I mean, it's not horrible. Sure, you don't have C-Rod back there. You don't have Ray Davis. You don't have Smoke. You don't have Benny Snell. I was reminded of Benny Snell. One of you guys chimed in the YouTube comments and reminded me about Benny Snell. Yeah, he was a really good player. Kentucky doesn't have those guys this year, but I wouldn't say the running backs are horrible. Offensive line's not as good as what it was last year, that's for sure. But it's been a little bit of everything, and Brock Vandagriff certainly has not helped himself out. So will it be Brock Vandagriff, the starting quarterback for this season, going to start against Tennessee? We'll see. The last quarterback that was on the field against Auburn for the Wildcats of Kentucky was Gavin Wimsatt. And a little bit about Brock Vandagriff first. When you look at plays where he is throwing it 20 yards down the field, he is 10 of 24, completing 41% of his passes, a touchdown, 1 interceptions. Medium range, 10 to 19 yards. He is completing 53% of his passes, 28 of 52, 458 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Short passing game. From the line of scrimmage within 10 yards, he is 77% completion, 41 of 53, 335, a touchdown and an interception. And then behind the line of scrimmage, he's completing those passes at an 88% clip, 22 of 25, for 97 yards and a touchdown. Brock Vandagriff, again, whenever he's, let's see here. See if I can get pressure here, passing pressure. Brock Vandagriff, whenever he's kept clean, that's on 62% of dropbacks. he is completing passes at a 69.1%. When he's under pressure, which is 37.2% of dropbacks, he's only completing passes at 29.1%. So obviously the key there is get pressure on Brock Vandagriff, which Tennessee does pretty routinely. The sacks haven't been there. The sack numbers are low from where I thought they would be, but I mean, anybody want to say that Tennessee's defensive line isn't good? Because Tennessee's defensive line is pretty great. In fact, I think it's pretty elite, and Tennessee's good at getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So when Brock Vandagriff is pressured, which has been on 37.2% of dropbacks this year, he's only completing passes at 29%, and he's thrown an interception. When he's not blitzed, he's completing passes at 58%. When he is blitzed, he's completing passes at 53%. So again, I think pressure is the key here. Sure, he's still completing passes at a decent clip when he's been blitzed, but when he's under pressure overall on nearly 40% of dropbacks, that completion percentage goes down to less than 30, which is just not great. Brock Vandagriff on the season so far, as I mentioned yesterday, 57% passer, 1,236 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It's just not been the season that Kentucky thought they were going to have with this quarterback and Brock Vandagriff. So you made the move at halftime last week against Peyton Thorne and the Auburn Tigers. You went with Gavin Wimsatt. He's certainly no stranger to the game of football. He's been playing for quite some time. He's played his previous 3 seasons at Rutgers. He was never winning any awards at Rutgers. He comes to Kentucky to be the backup quarterback, but to play in the Southeastern Conference. On the season so far, he's not played a lot. 8 of 20. Passing numbers are not good. 8 of 20, 93 yards, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. He does have 42 rushing attempts, so he's coming to run a little bit. 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Auburn on Saturday, when he came in and played the second half, he completed 3 of 10 passes, 34 yards, 1 interception. He had 23 yards on the ground on 9 attempts. So they tried to get him a part of the run game utilizing his legs, but he was only averaging 2.6 yards per attempt. And, of course, that's not very good. Again, has only attempted 20 passes on the season, has Gavin Wimsatt. Overall, I mean, I'm not even going to take this as a sample because 20 passes is not a good sample size. Let's go back last year to 2023 when he was at Rutgers just to get a bigger picture on how he is as a passer overall. In deep passes, 20 yards down the field in 2023 at Rutgers, Gavin Wimsatt was 9 of 33. He completed those passes at 27.3%, 9 of 33 for 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Again, this is Gavin Wimsatt's numbers as the starting quarterback for Rutgers last year. Medium range passing, he completed those at a 38% clip, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Short game, 68%, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and behind the line of scrimmage. Behind the line of scrimmage, goodness gracious, he struggled with like screen passes and dump offs and stuff like that. 10 of 17 behind the line of scrimmage in 2023. That's 58%, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So Wimsatt, obviously not a very accurate passer. Not a very accurate passer whatsoever, but he is experienced. He's seen a whole lot of football. Will Tennessee see a starting quarterback for Kentucky and Gavin Wimsatt? Maybe. Will Tennessee see Brock Vandagriff? Maybe. We'll have to see, but Tennessee's going to be preparing for both of those guys, and that should come as no shock because going into the Florida game, the game plan for Florida ever since, I guess, whatever loss that was against A&M maybe, they were playing both of those quarterbacks. They were playing both DJ Lagway and, of course, the veteran there that I am blanking on his name right now because that's just how my mind works sometimes. But of course, he tore his ACL, and really, really unfortunate coming over from Wisconsin. See, if I talk in circles like this, eventually his name will pop up. Anyway, I thought he had a really, really good Florida career after coming over from Wisconsin. I'm just going to move on because clearly I'm blanking on his name right now. You know what? I am Graham Mertz. There we go. I was about to Google his name. Graham Mertz is the name. Tennessee entered that game knowing they were going to play 2 quarterbacks. So I think Tennessee's preparing for 2 quarterbacks. The difference is Jackson Arnold, who we'll speak on here in a little bit in segment number 2, Jackson Arnold and his backup, which we didn't know much about his backup at the time, but Jackson Arnold clearly was a very hyped up quarterback. Graham Mertz has played really well at Florida, and his backup DJ Lagway is going to be a stud. Okay, so they're kind of in a different conversation. Quarterback over at Arkansas, pretty talented player coming over from Boise State. He's had a pretty solid year. He had a really, really good game against Tennessee. I mean, Taylor Green had a couple of really, really nice passes down the sideline. I just had to Google his name because clearly my mind is just not working today. But he was the guy. They weren't going to go to a backup quarterback in that game. Alabama wasn't going to go to a backup quarterback. I guess my point is, even when Tennessee's seen two quarterbacks, they've been much better than what Kentucky's done so far this year. So Tennessee's dealt with mobile quarterbacks in several games this year. Green comes to mind, Milroe, Lagway, Arnold, so on and so forth. So Tennessee will prepare a lot of the same that they've been preparing all season long, and the challenge, at least on paper, shouldn't be as difficult for Kentucky's quarterback. So we'll have to see exactly kind of what they want to do. We'll see if Mark Stoops announces a starting quarterback at some point this week. I'm expecting Brock Vandagriff because clearly I think he's a better option, but Kentucky's not winning football games right now. Kentucky's lost 3 straight Southeastern Conference games. So if you're the Wildcats, it's kind of like, well, what do you have to lose? One other note, a lot of you guys, and I'll talk to Josh about this a little bit in Board Wednesday. I recorded that before I recorded this. A lot of you guys are talking about Gerald Mincey this week and everything. Is what it is. He left. He was talking a lot of smack. Hey, time to pay up. Time to pay up, right? So he's hurt right now. He's been hurt. We'll see if he plays, but I think if you don't play, it's a really bad look for Gerald Mincey. Now, again, if you're injured, you're injured. Nothing you can do about it, okay? But you talked a lot of smack this summer, and if you don't play, I think that's a bad look. I thought it was silly to talk to smack anyway because that certain smack talk wasn't making much sense, especially about the tempo offense. But a lot of fans want to know about Gerald Mincey. Is what it is, guys. Transfer portal era. Kids leave. Gerald Mincey, this is his 3rd team from the Southeastern Conference he's been a part of. Started at Florida, came to Tennessee, now he's at Kentucky. Is what it is. There's bigger storylines in this game, in my opinion. The Gerald Mincey situation shouldn't be used as extra motivation because, quite frankly, it's not much of a story, in my opinion. Wish him the absolute best, but, I don't think that he or his team's going to get a win and be feeling good about themselves come Saturday. That is just my opinion. Spoilers for the picks later in the week. Hey, when we come back, I want to get into an article that I thought was pretty interesting. Disappointing 5 stars in college football. That's coming up next. We continue on here with a Wednesday morning edition of Locked On Vols. I want to tell you guys about my friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an app to where you can buy tickets to events in your area. Sporting events at Lindsey Nelson Stadium come spring. The new Smoky Stadium downtown, right? Food City Center basketball season's about to get going. Season tip-off is Monday. You've got football games that are over at Neyland Stadium right now, but also you got plays and concerts at the Tennessee Theater, the Bijou Theater downtown, comedy shows around the area. This is just my area here in Knoxville and East Tennessee. Your area as well. Any type of event, sporting event, comedy show, concerts, entertainment event, you can buy tickets to those events by using the Game Time app. You can check out what they have to offer, the Game Time picks, where they're going to filter all through the fluff so that you can find the most incredible deals. They got the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They have the lowest price guarantee where, again, if you find a cheaper ticket somewhere else in the same section, Game Time's going to credit you 110% of the difference. Again, all that and more on the Game Time app. Plus, if you download the app today, put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Locked On College, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Put in the redeem code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, guys, we have an abbreviated segment number 2 because I went long-winded in segment 1. I'm going to go long-winded in segment 3 with Josh Ward for Ward Wednesday. But I was looking around at CBSSports.com, and you guys know I like to go to CBS Sports sometimes when I need topics, I need conversation starters. Bye week, there's some slow days here. Even building off the bye with no game to really talk about since the Alabama game. So I was looking around a little bit, and I did find this article that I thought was really intriguing. This is from Cody Nigel, I believe, and CBS, of course, is affiliated with 24/7 Sports, and I work for On3, so I never really bring 247 Sports on this, but it is affiliated with CBS Sports. So I just thought overall it was a nice conversation piece, and so I wanted to discuss it with you guys here. It's disappointing 5 stars from the last 2 recruiting classes. Recruiting classes of 2023 and 2024. So as I mentioned, Brock Vandagriff, he was in 2022 or maybe 2021. He would be in this conversation for me, but we're just doing the last 2 classes. So a couple of interesting names here on the board. Might I remind you, and this is where I'm going to flip over to the On3 top quarterback recruits for the class of 2023. Heavy quarterback class, highly popularized, highly touted. This was the quarterback class. The number one overall quarterback in that class, the number one overall player in the recruiting cycle is Tennessee's own Nico Iamaleava. We remember that. Well, Arch Manning was the second-ranked quarterback. He was the third-ranked player in the class, according to On3. He was number 2. That's Arch Manning. The third-ranked quarterback in that class was Jackson Arnold. Tennessee's already played him. He was 6th overall in that recruiting class, according to On3. The fourth-ranked quarterback was Dante Moore, who, of course, went to UCLA, and he was ranked number 20th overall in the class. The fifth quarterback was Malachi Nelson, 30th overall in the nation. He went to Southern Cal. He was the fifth quarterback, and those were the big five. Other names that are worth mentioning: Lenore Sellers, who South Carolina starting quarterback, was in this class. He was 8th overall. Yeah, that's really the only other one that you guys would probably know. But nonetheless, that was the big five. It was Nico, Arch, Jackson Arnold, Dante Moore, Malachi Nelson. Those were the big five. So I'm bringing that up because the first name that's mentioned in this disappointing 5 stars is Malachi Nelson, who went to USC and is now at Boise State. He, again, was the former 5-star quarterback, according to On3. He came in at number 30th in the country. So he's the first one that was mentioned right there, Malachi Nelson. The second quarterback on this list was Dante Moore. He transferred, of course, went to UCLA, transferred to Oregon, and as I mentioned, Dante Moore, he was a 5-star, the 20th overall guy in the class, and the 4th-ranked quarterback. So that's interesting. Dante Moore, Malachi Nelson, both on this list of disappointing 5 stars. And then here's Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold is listed on this. Former 5-star, the 3rd-ranked quarterback, number 6 overall in the country, Jackson Arnold. So right from the get-go in this article, I'm like, man, quarterback. How about that? There's some other names on here worth mentioning. Let's see here. Micah Hudson, wide receiver at Texas Tech. He's mentioned on here. Cormani McClain, the cornerback that went to Colorado, transferred to Florida. He's mentioned on here. Harbor, the wide receiver at South Carolina. He's mentioned on here. Cam Coleman, interesting. Cam Coleman, wide receiver at Auburn. He's mentioned on here. Amaris Williams, edge rusher, who's also at Auburn. He's listed on this list. Keon Keeley, the edge defender from Alabama, is mentioned. And then there's one other one. Lance Hurd, who went to LSU and is now, of course, at Tennessee. This is what the article has to say about Lance Hurd. Quote, Lance Hurd ranked as one of the top offensive tackles coming out of high school in the class of 2023 and projected to be a major contributor for LSU. Although he earned a spot on the freshman All-American team, he primarily played as a reserve for special teams on field goal and extra point units. The 6'6", 340-pounder transferred to Tennessee ahead of the 2024 season with expectations of bolstering an offensive line in need of reinforcements. However, Hurd ranks 13th among SEC linemen and highest pressure rate allowed at 5% in 5 games played this season per True Media. I think we can all agree that we've been a little disappointed so far in what we've seen from Lance Hurd. Now, he played much better against Alabama, okay? He had a play here and there against Florida. Want to see some more consistency from him. Not ready to give up on Lance Hurd. I still think he's super talented, but he is a bit slower than I thought, feet-wise. But I thought that was interesting. He was mentioned on this list of disappointing 5 stars, and I don't think we can really argue that right now. But I did want to point out, everybody wants to talk about Nico this, Nico that, Nico's a bust, Nico's Joe Milton and all that. Well, you could be one of these guys, right? You could be Malachi Nelson. You could be Dante Moore. Or you could be Jackson Arnold, who were 3 of the top 6 overall, 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks according to the On3 rankings, and 3 of the top 30 players in the cycle according to On3. But according to CBS Sports, very disappointing so far. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to bring that along, pass it along. Give me your thoughts, comments, concerns about this list if you so choose in the comment section. Of course, you guys know my DMs are open. You can always tweet me at _Caner. All right, let's get into Josh Ward. Little Ward Wednesday. We go over a bevy of topics. Tennessee, Alabama, a little bit of that. Tennessee, Kentucky coming up. A little bit of Gerald Mincey, all that and more. Ward Wednesdays coming up next right here as we continue on here with this Wednesday edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. No game last week, Josh. Obviously, Kentucky's coming up this week, the final 5-game stretch of the regular season. What's your hope? What do you hope that Tennessee tried to focus on during the off week, aside from trying to get healthy and trying to rest a little bit?
That is a big priority right there, making sure they're physically where they need to be for a 5-game stretch. It's not the toughest overall 5-game stretch that a team is going to play, but it's 5 straight weeks of football, and you're going up against SEC teams. I would say for Tennessee, a lot of it is continuing what they have been working on the offensive side of the ball. There's the obvious question, can they come out and play better in the first half? And I think they will this week, but I also thought that before the previous game, and I was wrong. So whatever they need to work on behind the scenes in fixing some of those first half issues, because we have seen improvement in the second half. Tennessee was much better, made big plays in the second half against Alabama. So figuring out why they've made mistakes and correcting those to come out and have a good first half. If that happens, Tennessee could have its best overall offensive game of the season, at least in a power conference game.
Am I wrong? And I understand, the way Tennessee's played offensively in conference play, it's always a ride. It's never going to be easy. So I'm taking all this with a grain of salt. But man, I'm looking at this Kentucky team, and on paper, I've watched them play a couple of times, not much. I'm no Kentucky expert, but I'm looking at this team on paper, and this is just a horrendous offense, just so bad. And this defense, though I don't think they're as healthy as they need to be, like J.J. Weaver, Keon Walker, those guys are NFL studs. They're good. But they've got some players defensively, but here in the last couple of weeks, boy, Auburn ran all over them, Florida ran all over them. This is just not a very impressive-looking Kentucky club.
No, and that's why Tennessee, led by Dylan Sampson, should be able to come out and have success, get him some numbers, but also get the offense going that way, and that should create opportunities in the passing game. And something that we've talked about on our show to start the week is continuing Nico's involvement in the run game as well, because that adds to what he's able to do. It adds to the offense, and it affects the opposing defense. So it starts with Dylan Sampson. He's their offensive MVP. Can make a case for team MVP with what he's been able to do this season, and that'll be the case this week. But there should be some opportunities, and Tennessee may not need to take that many shots, but there should be some opportunities in this game against Kentucky to hit some plays down the field. We saw that happen 2 years ago very quickly. This is not the same offense, but there could be similar opportunities for Tennessee. Chris Braz with that touchdown catch against Alabama, maybe there's some carryover for him. And then Dante Thornton has clearly improved from last year to this year. He's an obvious big play threat in this Tennessee offense too.
Safe to say this is the one game on the schedule for Kentucky every year they want to win, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For Kentucky, this is a huge deal, and the season has been a big disappointment based on how October went. It's incredible to me, Eric, that they went and won that game at Ole Miss, and I came out of it thinking, okay, you know what? Credit to Kentucky, because that South Carolina performance was rough.
Yeah.
To turn around and show up and beat Ole Miss like that said something to me, but I guess it told the wrong story because they did not capitalize on that win, going 0-3 in October. So if Kentucky is going to try to win or try to save this season, you have this game, you have Louisville. That's a big deal. And they're running out of time. So Kentucky's probably thinking, okay, can we get after Nico? Can we cause some problems for him? Take the ball away and create some kind of spark. Tennessee needs to make sure that doesn't happen. Tennessee needs to protect the quarterback, protect the ball. If the Vols do that, the Vols are going to win.
Yeah, they started the season off 3-2 with a blowout loss at home to South Carolina, a 1-point loss at home to Georgia, and that 3-point win on the road at Ole Miss. So you're just saying, who the heck is Kentucky? And since then, they've lost 3 straight, and it's not been great. So this is obviously the one game on the season, the schedule every single year Kentucky's got to have. Kentucky wants. For Tennessee, what's that one game? We have this conversation all the time. There's a couple different rivalry games. Which game is more important to you? I would venture to say if you polled all the Tennessee fans, they'd probably say Alabama. Would you say Alabama? Would you say Florida?
Would you say Vanderbilt? What would you say?
Well, the last 2 times Tennessee has beaten Alabama, the fans rushed the field. They didn't do that when they beat Florida 2 years ago or this year. So Bama has to top Florida. Part of that is where the programs are, but that's where the programs are. So it's either Alabama or you could make a case for Georgia because Georgia is the king of the SEC that Tennessee is trying to topple. So I think the answer that most Tennessee fans would give if they really sat down, thought about it, and were honest would say Alabama. We have this conversation about which rivalry is the biggest deal to you. I think overall beating Alabama has been the biggest deal, but Tennessee's done that now back-to-back times at home. The next big challenge is beating Georgia because it's been a long time since Tennessee was able to beat the Bulldogs.
Gerald Mincey, how much thought have you given him since he's left Tennessee?
The only time I've really thought about Gerald Mincey is when he's talked about Tennessee and then it becomes a topic on our show. So I haven't spent that much time talking about him. Maybe a little bit when we were talking about Tennessee's offensive tackle play and what could have been if he stayed versus what the lineup ended up being. But yeah, he's a guy that I don't think got enough credit for trying to fight through injury at times last year. I also don't know that Gerald Mincey played up to his full potential when he was at Tennessee. And now he's at his third school in the SEC, having gone from Florida to Tennessee to Kentucky. I thought it was odd in the offseason when he talked about Tennessee the way that he did, but I also get it. He probably felt slighted that he wasn't appreciated enough and was excited about his new spot and was excited about a big game coming up. But those comments do not get forgotten, especially by Tennessee fans and I would guess Tennessee players. So assuming he's out there, if he's out there at tackle for Kentucky, then he's going to have a tough challenge because this D-line can go against anybody. That's especially the case against Gerald Mincey.
Yeah, I was just having a little fun, honestly. But you did bring up a good point. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Gerald Mincey was an all-SEC player because he clearly wasn't. I'm not trying to sit here and say that he was a model citizen because he clearly wasn't. He was a great teammate. I'm not saying he was a bad teammate, but he wasn't that guy. He did play through some stuff last year where there were other guys on the team that did not. So I will give him credit there. But his comments over the offseason were just, what? And so I'm intrigued to see.
Yeah, it was a bad decision is what it was because of everything. Because they're playing in Knoxville, because Kentucky's not as good as Tennessee, because Tennessee's D-line is elite. If he said that about a defensive line that's not very good, or said that about a team that doesn't have a very good defensive line, okay. But Tennessee might have the best defensive line in the country, and they might have the best edge rusher in the country. So that's what Kentucky now has to go up against, and they're going to have a huge crowd behind them for the whole game. So Gerald Mincey at Tennessee, he was not perfect. He got in some trouble. Remember last year was not available for the Florida game, and that was
except for PATs.
Except for PATs, he was available. But Tennessee has dealt with some bad luck with injury issues on PATs. So having as much depth as you can for that is important. But
fair.
He also later in the season battled through injury, and we've seen over the last couple of seasons on the offensive line, guys at times maybe not battled through as much as they could. So I'll give him credit for that. But his comments in the offseason, I thought at the time were poorly designed and poorly timed, and I think that will show this week.
Yeah, even though Tennessee's tempo is not going as fast as normal, like the whole tempo comment, like what on earth are you talking about? So
yeah, come on.
Anyway, we'll see if he's out there playing. He didn't play last week. Moving on to bigger picture stuff. Is it ever okay for a Tennessee fan to root for Alabama to win a football game? I asked this. I was at a wedding this past weekend, had the whole beer and phone propped up watching football. You know me. And I'm watching the Alabama game. Somebody says, what game you watching? I'm like, Alabama game. Like, what's the score? And like, who you want to win? I'm like, well, it's not necessarily who I want to win. It's if you're a Tennessee fan, you kind of need Alabama to keep winning, right? So in that case, is that okay? And also, what team should Tennessee be rooting for in this big college football playoff fiasco?
Yeah, it's a complicated conversation. I do agree with you. Tennessee wanted Alabama to win this past weekend for strength of schedule purposes. Tennessee's schedule is not the strongest by SEC standards. If you rank the 16 schedules in the SEC, Tennessee's is near the bottom. The best win for Tennessee is going to be Alabama. So if the Tide were to just fall apart this year, and if they had lost to Missouri and then lost another game or two and went 7-5 or 8-4, that's no good for Tennessee in making a case if Tennessee's 10-2. Now, some fans in our conversation about this on the radio responded, let's just go beat Georgia and go 11-1. Yes, if that happens, Tennessee's playing for an SEC title, I guess, and in the playoff without any question. But if Tennessee loses in Athens and is 10-2, let's assume a victory against Vanderbilt for this conversation, then it's not all guaranteed what happens for Tennessee. They'll look at Tennessee's strength of schedule, quality of wins, how other teams have done in a comparable situation. But now you have the Alabama-LSU game coming up. That one I am a little conflicted in which one you want for Tennessee, because there is also this fear that I know Tennessee fans have. If Tennessee and Alabama are both 10-2 at the end of the season, yes, Tennessee has the head-to-head win, but if Alabama has beaten Georgia and has won in Baton Rouge against LSU, then quality wins are stronger for Alabama than they would be for Tennessee, despite Tennessee's most impressive win being against the Tide. We saw it 2 years ago, different situation because it was only a 14 playoff, but Bama was ranked one spot ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee had also lost its quarterback and had an ugly loss against South Carolina. So I also think this, if Tennessee does lose to Georgia, it needs to be a well-played competitive football game. If Tennessee is 10-2 and has not looked good against Georgia, and Bama is 10-2 and has finished strong, that could go the wrong way for Tennessee. So fans who are conflicted for a reasonable, I think, explainable reason based on recent history.
It's weird, man. Welcome to the college football playoff era where every single game from like October 15th on really means so much.
The next 5, I said this, I think, last week, and it still holds true. The next 5 weeks are going to be wild, and there will be surprising results. There'll be some upsets that affect this conversation, but there are more teams, I think, in the playoff picture outside the SEC and the Big Ten, or even in the Big Ten with a team like Indiana, than people anticipated. The Iowa State, BYU teams that have deepened this conversation of teams that are in the running entering November.
Yeah, and like the ACC too. Like, I mean, SMU's schedule's so trash. They need to lose a game and be out of this conversation. But they're undefeated in ACC play, right? Yeah. They're. You need Miami to lose. That'd be great. You need Penn State, in my opinion, to beat Ohio State this weekend. You need Army to beat Notre Dame. Can we just get Notre Dame out of here? I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah, that's another one. If Notre Dame wins out, which is very possible, that Army game's going to be tough. But if Notre Dame wins out and they're 11-1, they have a bad loss at home against Northern Illinois. They also have a win at Texas A&M, which is currently atop the SEC standings. So,
but kind of like Alabama, that's Notre Dame. They're in. You know, like they're
yeah,
gonna
like
be in.
Yeah, and by the way, that loss would be bad. I'm gonna have a losing argument if I say 11-1 Notre Dame shouldn't be in. You know, I'm just gonna lose in that argument. So I recognize the Miami Clemson thing. If Clemson wins out and Miami wins out, they both have a great chance of being in. The terrible scenario for Tennessee fans would be if Clemson wins the ACC title, because Miami at 12-1 is also in, right? So there are only so many spots. You're trying to get one of 7 spots, because 4 automatic spots plus the group of 5 spot, that takes away 5. So you're trying to be one of 7 if you can't go win the conference title.
And then I know we got to go, so this is an out the door comment, but and then you had that conversation that I've been kind of thinking about all week long. Like, what if there's a 2-loss SEC team that goes to the SEC championship game and then loses? Like, how in the world, if you're the committee, are you going to punish that team that was one of the 2 best teams in the SEC?
Yeah, I don't think they will. That my opinion is, and I could be wrong, we'll find out in 6 weeks, but the loser of the SEC and the Big Ten title games will be rewarded, I think, or at least held up, because I think they will say, okay, well, you were better than these other teams. 10-3 is better than 10-2, because the third is just playing in the conference title game against a great team or a really good team. So I think that the conference title losers, at least in the Big Ten and the SEC, maybe the ACC, if it's a team like Miami, will still be rewarded, not only in the playoff, but hosting in the first round.
Josh, as always, man, you and Jason Swain, noon to 3 on The Sports Animal. What do you got coming up on the show this week?
A lot of Vols. Tennessee football heading into November. Tennessee basketball getting started with the regular season tipping off next week. We have the newsletter every Friday. It is free. Appreciate everybody who has subscribed. Would encourage you to do so. JoshandSwain.com or the link that Eric provides you.
Josh, we'll talk to you next Wednesday for another edition of Ward Wednesday.
You got it. Thanks, Eric.
That is Josh Ward, former host of Locked On Vols, current radio host with VFL Jason Swain, Josh and Swain. Again, noon to 3 weekdays on The Sports Animal. Fun show here today on a Wednesday. We'll continue looking ahead to Kentucky, what Tennessee needs to do to pick up win number 7 on the season and 4 in Southeastern Conference play, as we begin this 5-game stretch to end the regular season. It's going to be fun, fast, and furious. And as Josh just said, this last month of November, it's going to be wild and wacky. So buckle up. It's going to be fun. And we'll have everything for you right here, Tennessee related, on Locked On Vols. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody.